Imperialism. Imperialism occurs when a strong nation takes over a weaker nation or region and dominates its economic, political, and cultural life. After the Industrial Revolution, this became a common practice of European nations seeking for new sources of raw materials and markets to sell manufactured products. Industrialized countries of the West sought to expand their economies by obtaining raw materials, which could be transported back to factories, turned into manufactured goods, and shipped back to the colonies' markets for sale. European explorers were looking for a faster way to get to Asia and trade for silk, spices, etc., and also to avoid the Moorish taxes to cross the Middle East. While the explorers often failed to find a faster way to get to Asia, they did find areas rich in natural resources. They exploited the local population and turned them into cheap labor force. That labor force allowed them to send cheap raw materials home. These new areas were called colonies. This map shows European colonies in the North and South America. This interaction began to introduce Europeans to all kinds of new things, including foods like sugar, corn, squash, etc. Unfortunately for the natives in colonies, the explorer brought uninvited guests, diseases. The Monroe Doctrine was first stated by the 5th American President James Monroe during 1823. The Napoleonic Wars served as the inspiration for the Monroe Doctrine. It was based on the American fears related to the possible revival of monarchies in Europe. The main objective of the U.S. government was to secure the newly independent colonies of Latin America from European intervention. Monroe said, "Hands off to Europe." The only remaining unclaimed land in the world was Africa. European nations competed with each other to gain as African colonies as possible before the other countries did. The Berlin Conference set the rules for the carving up of the continent. This period was known as the Scramble for Africa. Europeans looked in Africa for a new labor force. The slaves were bought in Africa using gold and sugar from America. All slaves were used to produce raw materials and cash crops like sugar, cotton, and tobacco to be shipped back to Europe. The factories produced manufactured goods like textiles, rum, etc. in order to be sold to African America. Although not a colony as whole, parts of China had come under the rule of foreign powers. Great Britain, for example, used military force to defeat the Chinese in the Opium Wars, which resulted in unfair treaties for China and expanded British imperialism in specific regions. In India, one reaction was the Sepoy Rebellion. It failed and Great Britain secured its hold in India even further. Also, some groups in China sought to remove the Western influences by force, like the Boxers. They failed, and the Chinese government gave the Western powers even more control over their country. conclusion, I can say imperialism was not good. We have to admit some countries benefited from being colonized because they improved and gained modernization, and also they had opportunities for some commerce routes with other places. But mostly they lost a lot because the direct rule in which all their culture, history, and religion was totally erased, and they completely changed them bamboozled. Also, I have to say imperialism has not completely finished nowadays, because even it apparently looks like every country has control of their own, it is not real at all, because some places are still economically dependent from others. Every nation should be independent in all the branches and conserve their identity no matter what. That is something that imperialism does not admit. That is the main reason why it is not good, because it takes off the balance that should exist.